What we have here today is a Taylor 2003 615, and it's going to need a partial refret. Notice on the second fret at the plain strings you see what steel strings do to nickel fret wire. They create serious divots, and the problem with setting these up again with low action and a properly adjusted truss rod is that the string, when you fret the string here, it's going to go deeper than these frets will allow. That's why there's these little dig outs here, and they gradually get smaller as you go up because these two frets are being used and these are slightly higher. So you can develop a buzz from this string going down into that divot there and being too low for the setup. So we're going to correct that by replacing frets 1 through 5 with some stainless steel fret wire. It's okay to mix the stainless with the nickel, and I'm going to show you that. Also, the saddles that a lot of Taylor guitars come with have it's about a 9.5 radius, whereas the fingerboard radius is a 14-inch. So I usually recommend replacing the factory tusk saddle with a properly radiused bone saddle, which I'm going to make out of this piece of bone. I've already got my penciled rough outline going for that, and that will give the saddle the radius of the fingerboard. As a result of the over radiused saddle in these Taylor guitars, the strings are too low in relation to the mid strings. In other words, the strings on the E, the high E side and the low E side, these strings are getting too low, and the ones in the center are too high. So we need to go down to a flatter radius than this so that we'll have uniformity of string height in relation to the fingerboard. And just to be clear on that, notice the comparison. This is a 9.5 radius gauge. This is the radius of the factory saddle of this guitar, and this is the radius that's going to be on the new saddle, the bone saddle, and you can see that it's flatter and it will conform better to the radius of the fingerboard. So now, with the 5 frets extracted from the fingerboard, we have a problem with some of the wood, especially this is especially true of the ebony on Taylor guitars, pulling up with the frets as they came out. Even though I got the frets really hot to get them out, there's still a little bit of wood that pulls up right near the tang groove. So what we want to do is take, I normally just take a fret guard like this, something real flat. You could use an old plastic saddle to do this, and just gently tap with the plastic hammer. And that taps it back down and makes it so that you can smooth that out a lot easier. If you need to use any sandpaper, that makes it a whole lot easier to clean those up and get them evened up for the new frets. Now let's compare the two saddles. This is the factory saddle that the Taylor guitar came with, and this is the bone saddle that I just made for it. And you can see that the top of the saddle is a lot more radiused or steep on the Taylor saddle, whereas the saddle I made for it is a 14-inch with not which is a flatter saddle. The top of it is flatter. So the radius of this saddle is a 9.5, the saddle it came with, and that is an over radius to the fingerboard. This one is radius properly now, so the action will be more uniform. And you'll notice that about the center of this saddle is about the same as the one that I've made, but notice that the edges of the saddle curve down much shorter here, especially on the high E side. This has a tendency to make these strings too close to the frets, whereas these strings are at the right relation to the frets, the strings in the middle of the saddle. But with the new saddle, they're uniform all the way across. Another good thing about this is that this is a bone saddle, and certainly the expression system is going to sound better with this saddle. Another thing I've noticed with these Taylor factory saddles is that they are curved on the top. They have an intonation curve point that is angled toward the left. Do you see that? Well, I found this is really not necessary for intonating the guitar. It also has a B compensated saddle and then another E compensation that's leaning all the way forward. I actually find the best way to intonate this guitar is just take it straight up the saddle center and round off and smooth off the top. The intonation was just fine with this saddle. And with this one, the other difficulty that this shape of the saddle on the top is going to pose is that if you put a piezo pickup under this saddle with all of that pressure on the top of the saddle going toward one corner, then the saddle is going to have a tendency to not pressurize the piezo evenly. And it's always best to do that from the center of the saddle rather than from some corner of the saddle, which might cause it to slightly lean a little bit more on that piezo. So now I've replaced the first 5 factory frets with stainless steel, and I used the same size fret wire as came on the guitar, and these have been leveled off and dressed now, fully dressed, and they are level with the factory frets beginning here with fret 6 and going up. So all of the fingerboard now is level. I've leveled all of these off and it's fully dressed, and so now we're ready to string her up and finish the setup. One other thing I'd like to point out about stainless steel fret wire in a partial refret is that there's this talk going around that stainless steel fret wire makes a guitar sound tinny and all this. I don't buy it at all. I've done many stainless steel refrets, never had that problem. And in a partial refret, you're mixing stainless with nickel. Never had a problem there with tone. Done it many times. Everything plays evenly and beautifully, so there's going to be no conflict of tone between these frets and these when we're finished. So now I have this Taylor 615 strung up and fully adjusted and all set up. Plays beautiful, sounds great. And the other thing I wanted to mention that a lot of Taylor guitars need is the replacement of the expression system. This one has the old ES1 in it, and these do not work very well for a lot of players. I find that they don't sound true to an acoustic guitar sound. They can be noisy, this pickup system, as well as a problem with a short battery life, especially these double A's, these old ES1s. The batteries don't last very long at all in them. See the video that's on this channel about replacing the expression system with the Baggs pickup. I recommend that you watch that. So there are 3 things that I have pointed out here. The first is a lot of Taylors will need a partial refret of at least the first 4 or 5 frets with stainless. This is very common after you've played a Taylor for about, with me it took 18 months to wear these frets out, but they could run you 2 or 3 years depending on how much playing you do. But the fret wire does wear out very easily, so the fret wire needs to be replaced in a partial refret after a few years of playing. The other is the saddle. The saddle that it comes with is not properly radiused. This new saddle that I've put in there now is radiused as it should be and all ready for a piezo. Should I put one in there, I would just have to shave the bottom just a little bit for the height of the piezo. and that would work great with a piezo, Baggs piezo saddle in there and pickup. And then the third thing is the expression system. These need to be replaced. I use wood plugs for these. That will be always the same type wood that the siding of the guitar has. So this concludes this video and 3 things that Taylor guitars need. Thank you for watching.